Okay, we are recording.
Hello.
Hello, Naima. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Miss Divinity Ranch, Divinity School. My name is Naima Lei, also known as Lorde, part of the Lorde's work. I am an artist and intimacy counselor and touch therapist, as my lovely friend has called me at times. Just a sample of my work is right behind me. This is one of my most recent landscapes that I've created.
That is gorgeous. What inspired that, or what does that signify and feel like to you?
So honestly, this is my second landscape that I've ever created. I usually focus on single subject artwork or patterns. So I haven't created something and tried to take everything in as a whole. And I feel like this piece in particular, it just feels like climbing out of sadness and finding light and calm. And just the composition of it all was really fascinating to me and very different. It's
Yes.
very different.
I love it. Yeah. It feels like enlightenment.
Thank you. Speaking of, I literally just, I'm collaborating with this amazing artist, OK Miss Jones. She makes custom collage artwork and custom cards. And her store is going to be launching up this November. And I have at least 3 to 5 different custom wallpapers or wrapping papers that I'll be putting onto her work as well as a collaboration. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting and I can't wait to launch that. I'm sure that I'll put the link in as soon as we get that, but otherwise I will put in all of our social medias down below and my website and all of that stuff. Very exciting.
Yay! So can you just tell us a little bit about your story, as much as you want to tell? To me, so we met this past year on Lago Atitlan, Lake Atitlan in Guatemala at the good old Doozy Koala.
There it is. Oh, you can't see it. There's my sticker from the Doozy Koala.
Oh, the Doozy Koala. Yes, there it is. That if you want to go someplace to party, little did I know what the Doozy Koala would actually be like.
Don't ever ring the bell. If you go, don't ring the bell.
Yeah, don't ring the bell. Don't. So, we met and absolutely bonded and essentially formed a coven and a sisterhood in just a few days' time. And, since then you've become one of my closest friends. And from the beginning, when I met you, you just inspired me so much with your courageous, shameless, exuberant living of your truth. And I know that that's been a bit of a journey. So I feel like that's the biggest inspiration you give me, and I want to share that with people. So
thank you. So that actually brings me up. I have this journal that I found a little while ago, which is kind of retelling my own story to me. I feel like, and I'm sure that everyone can relate to this, it's like you kind of have an idea of who you are and what you like as a kid. And as you ask questions, you ask your parents, or they tell you to be careful without telling you to think through it, all of a sudden you just like build up this sort of wall or this kind of anxiety and fear about exploring things because you're just told be careful without thinking about it. And so for me personally, I've always been very attracted to sensuality and the power of the erotic, which I have talked about with you before, with Audre Lorde's work, which is actually which was the inspiration to my name, Lorde Lei, because like I can see I'm talking as a guest lecturer for my critical perspectives on sexuality class, and we talk about how difficult it is all the time for women in particular to talk about their sexuality because there's this weird shame behind it. And like in my journal, when I was 12, you can see me talking to my best friend, not only talking about what we think about as we're masturbating, but also like what fingers we use and like how we do it. And I know that seems a little off the wall, but is it? Because when you're 12 and you're figuring your stuff out, it's wonderful to connect with other people and realize, oh, I'm not alone. Oh, this isn't weird. It's just maybe not talked about. And there are so many things that people don't talk about. And for me, living in my life, I've kind of just adopted this reality that I am always hard to talk about. I'm a queer woman of color. And even as the woman of color, I felt not colorful enough sometimes because I'm an Asian American. Usually people of color are seen as Latinos, and the African Americans. And for me, I've always felt like this weird exoticism around me. Like I'm temporary. Like you're not actually a person of color. You're not actually whatever. You're like the good race is what I've been called because I'm benign, which also makes me feel like I'm not present and permanent. And so I've kind of just like lived with this reality that it's hard to talk about things. So I'm just going to talk about them and make it seem okay. I kind of tell everyone right off the get-go that I am a sensual person, that I am loud, that I'm an artist, and I will not shrink myself, even though sometimes I really feel like I want to shrink myself because it's so easy to, when you talk about the things that I like to talk about, like, I don't know, what's the epidemic with the women faking orgasms? That's craziness. And it's like, it's questions that people don't want to answer. So they kind of just shut down. And
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. So I have so much I want to talk to you about. So I want to come back to the women faking orgasms thing because,
Always.
you know, a big thing that's been going on for me has been, you know, and you know this, continuing to acknowledge all of these places of seeking external validation, looking to be an object of other people's desire rather than the subject of my own desires. And also, I just want to say I am going to link to Audre Lorde's excerpt that you shared with me that is one of the most inspiring pieces I've ever read, that is called The Power of the Erotic. And, you know, there's also a really good part in there that I relate to as far as this channel goes, that, you know, I think our conversations are part of. Like, she talks about how this apportioning off and getting rid of the erotic is like part of the reason why we feel like spirituality and politics can't go together. And there's a lot of good things like that in there. So do you mind if I share like just a snippet of the first like conversation that we had where you told me what you do?
Oh, go for it.
Okay, cool. So we were, you know, on the balcony of the Doozy Koala, looking over this sacred lake and getting to know each other. We had literally met on the ferry, like going over. Naima was with a group of friends and I was a loner, and they invited me into their group of friends, and you were so friendly to me from the get-go, which I was very thankful for. And as I was talking to and getting to know Naima that night, you know, it's so boring, like, right, when we have these like, oh, what do you do? What do you do? Who are you? And I feel, you know, this sort of anxiety telling people, oh, like, I'm a writer, I have a YouTube channel. I didn't have a YouTube channel at the time, but it's like, well, that's not legitimate. Like, and so I ask you what you did, expecting some, I don't know what kind of answer. You're just like, I'm a sex worker. And I was like, I love you. Like the boldness, the realness, the no nonsense, and you've taught me so much. So can you talk a little bit about like that transition? Because you know, going in, you're like, yeah, when I was 12, this is who I was. I repressed that part of myself. I've come into that. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, with a lot of the conversations, you're a healer in so many ways. And so
Thank you. So it's funny because I spent some time after college actually joining the military because I thought that this was the right thing to do. And even while I was in for years, I was like, I feel like something's missing. I started camming pretty much as soon as I turned 18, because I've always had this exhibitionist side of me. Like, why should I be ashamed of my body? I want to celebrate it. Everyone else is celebrating their bodies, or someone else is celebrating their bodies. Like, I remember vividly in my imagination. Do you remember that Paris Hilton Carl's Jr. like ad of her eating a burger, washing her car?
Yes.
Yeah, so overtly sexual about a burger, right? And I just remember thinking like, wow, she looks so powerful doing whatever she wants to do in her power. And I've always wanted to harness that for myself as opposed to letting other people harness it for me. And like, even while I was in the military, I remember just like imagining my life outside of it. So finally, when I separated, I decided to explore exotic dancing. And the thing that when you start dancing, because that's the word that everyone uses, you're a dancer or a stripper, then you just get this idea in your head that what you're doing is dancing or stripping your clothes off. But if you're paying attention and you realize that if you take off all your clothes in the first song, what are you going to do the rest of the time? What do you have to offer? No, where do we go from here? And it's easy to get caught up immediately in the rejection of it. But I wanted to find, you're walking around half naked. Most of these women, it doesn't matter how beautiful they are. It doesn't matter how beautiful you think they are. Like, everyone has body issues. Everyone is worried and comparing themselves to other people, no matter what they look like. It's either like, oh, everybody cares too much about what I look like, or whatever. And so I was worried about my time going through and getting rejected. So I found ways to connect with other people instead of just through my body. I wanted to talk to them and get to know them past my body. So I would work on my conversation to these people, and work can be tough when people are rejecting you constantly. It can be very easy to immediately hate everyone that walks into the room who says no, which is not how you're going to make money, first off. So what I ended up doing is I started meditating during work and finding genuine connection with every person that I was with. It's easy to become like, oh my God, you're so sexy, daddy. You just kind of like throw that line around. But instead, I wanted to find something that I liked about every single person that I talked to, even if it was just their mustache, right? Like, everyone has something to them that makes them a genuine human being. And like, everyone can be kind and everyone can be cruel. It just is like, what is the combination of life events that has molded you into who you've become to believe that you can be cruel to someone or be kind to someone else? But I do believe that most people have that kindness, or at the very least, they have something in them that believes that they are kind and needs to be honored. And so in these gentlemen's clubs, the only thing that connects people is their love of touch, their love of beautiful beings, So I'm just interacting with all of these different people constantly, getting to know them on different levels, to the point where I would go to the back and we'd literally just hug the entire time, because that's what people need. You think a lot of the times that, you go into these sexually oriented businesses and you think that it's always going to be sex all the time. But really, that's just a guise, because men, in my opinion, men don't really feel comfortable showing emotion, at least in my experience. Like, I mean, you think about going to a sporting match, and even then, like, the form of expression that is most acceptable is happiness through anger, because anger is the most masculine trait. Anger is like the most acceptable masculine emotion that you can show. It's not okay to cry. So these men They're not okay showing vulnerability unless it's under the guise of sexuality. So a lot of the times I'd bring these men into our VIP rooms and we would literally talk for hours because that's all they wanted, is someone to listen to them, someone to see them and talk to them and just like caress them and remind them that they're a human being. Touch is so important. Like, it doesn't matter. Touch of any kind is important. This is why we have weighted blankets. This is why like isolation is the most effective form of torture. It's because we're social humans. And in this society, I feel like, especially during the last year, like our social aspects have been just slowly broken down. We're not allowed, like we're talking to each other like I am to you right now as just these floating heads. And then even in other Zoom meetings where you're trying to get to know each other, it turns into this like, oh no, we can't talk at the same time. We just have to be talked at. And that robs us of the side interactions. My game is stinted, man. When I used to go to groups, I used to talk to people on the sides of who's in the back, because those are the people who want to connect to. Everybody wants to connect, and now that's taken from us. We just have to listen to whoever's talking right now.
Yes.
But
yes.
Yeah, touch and connection is optimal to life. I just found a way to do it. I found a way to capitalize on it and to find growth through it and find connection through it. It is like a crash course of learning how to interact with people and getting them to trust you and trusting other people, and also figuring out your own boundaries. Very important. Everyone thinks boundaries are scary, or talking about confrontation is scary. But I think it's important that everyone talks about what they need at all times, right?
Yes.
I know.
Can you go more into boundaries, please? Because as you know, this is a big thing for me. And I think it's something that a lot of people who are going to watch this video could benefit from, because we hear that word a lot now. Like, what does it mean to set boundaries?
Yeah. And I just want to clarify by saying boundaries sound so scary. But if you don't have them, you don't know where you stand with someone. And it's not just like, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that. It's a lot about like, oh, I like it when we do this, or I like it when you do that. That's also a nice, gentle boundary. It's basically just guiding someone to learn how to interact with you. Otherwise, it becomes this dance of like, let me just toe the line. Is this okay? No, okay. But what if you accidentally overstep that bound, right? And we haven't talked about it. And I'm sure that's happened with so many people, like on so many different levels. But it's so wonderful to be with someone new and they just tell you exactly what they need. Like, hey, I'm not ready to touch you yet. Okay, cool. That's fine. There's so many other things that we can do to find intimacy, such as eye contact or deeper questions. It's not a stop everything. It's a reroute. This is what boundaries are. It's a reroute and figuring out a new way to interact with someone to make everyone feel comfortable. Boundaries is a form of communication. And I think the most important thing about communication isn't what's being said, it's how it's being received. And if you're talking to someone and your intent is one thing, but their reception is another thing, and you don't care about what it is that they're receiving from you, then what is the point of you saying anything at all? It's not communication. It's literally just to say it. So boundaries is a form of talking about what you need in terms of conversation. Like, I'm not comfortable talking about my family yet, but I will talk to you about this. I think that it's important whenever we set boundaries to not just say no, 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 no. That's touching back on what I said with my parents, where they say, be careful, but then they don't tell you how to move forward. And that's so important with boundaries, is you need to not only put a stopgap, but you need to give a direction on how to move forward afterwards, so that it doesn't feel like a constant halting.
Right.
You know?
What if it is a situation where, I mean, for me, this has been and we've had these conversations a lot, a steep learning curve of, well, I mean, so I'm recovering and it'll probably take the rest of my life. I guess this is my karma and what I'm here to learn from this idea that the nicest, which is I think different than kind, niceness, thing that I could do for people was just, you know, basically let them have any access to me that they wanted, because I deeply do desire to show everyone, and I know you do too, and we do it in different ways, that they are lovable, because everyone, no matter who they are, is lovable. And, you know, maybe you could shine some light on this. Like, so for me, one of the things, you know, that I've gone through and experienced has been like letting certain people, actually this has happened a lot, it's been a pattern in my life, like feeling like I have to let people have total access to me so that I can show that they're worthy of loving and that I'm worthy of loving. And then it gets to a point where I literally no longer feel safe. And only just recently have I learned to, you know, exercise what I think is true kindness and direct communication of just saying no, like no to our relationship going forward. And honestly, at this point, I don't want to have a conversation anymore. It's not about, like, this is no longer about, this is just me communicating no, you know. But then you feel like, and then people can say things like, well, this person says they love people or that they're a good friend, and then they just say they don't want to be friends with you anymore, so you never meant it, you know. And that to me is like so triggering, because it's like, yes, I did mean it. I also just didn't know how to take care of myself. But as far as, you know, trying to set those boundaries and saying no and really wanting to make yourself safe in the way of a relationship ending, I mean, can you shine any light on that?
Yeah, I was actually talking to my friend about this recently. She has the same thing, and it's like on a smaller scale. And I think that this is just a thing that a lot of people are taught is we need to make the person around us happy, you know? Like in my experience, I remember being in school and being told like, oh, hey, you're disturbing the class because of your spaghetti strap. So you need to take care of that because you're disturbing everyone. And so, or even like at a younger age, it's like you show up at a family reunion and you may feel uncomfortable, but then your parents will like, go give everyone a hug. They missed you so much. Give them a hug. And then you have to give up part of yourself, the touch, which is important, to be embraced by people that you don't want to be embraced by. And so you kind of just, and your parents tell you all the time, like, you can't say no to me, I'm your parent. No, you can't say no because I said so. So forgive yourself, first off, for trying to unlearn this ideology that we have to constantly appease everyone.
Yes.
It's in us. It's been taught to us. It's been ingrained and it's habitual at this point. But I do think one of the biggest things for me in terms of setting these boundaries for other people is not saying no to them all the time or saying yes to them all the time. It's scheduling time for yourself first. Say, I need to do this for me first, and then I'll fit you in later. If you don't know what that is, sit and think, what do you need? Like me personally, I was having a conversation with our friend, and I realized that I go through periods of very energetic. And some days, like yesterday, I was feeling really low. Like I can get very melancholy to the point where it's like, why am I here? What are my goals? And that's so difficult for me to talk about because I have so many people who reach out to me every single day to tell me they love me. And so many people who have called me an inspiration. And even still, I struggle monthly with these ideas that I am worthless. And so I started tracking my mood and figuring out like, oh, hey, based on a color chart, what is affecting me? So that I can schedule in time for myself or be prepared for the next time that this gray day happens. It will happen again in the future, right? But if I build myself up to be prepared for that, for myself, then I will have so much more to give to everyone else. As opposed to when I would normally go through this gray day, because I'm usually a morning person. I wake up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, let's go, let's do everything. But then these gray days, I'll wake up and it's like, I can't get out of bed for an hour. And then it just turns into beating yourself up over that. And then it's like, why bother? So it's important to like find these patterns and find time for yourself and forgive yourself, so that you're prepared for these moments, and take time for yourself so that you can give more on those other days when you are feeling energetic. It's just easier to have more to give to everyone else. And sometimes having more to give is actually less. Like,
Yes.
It's to touch on this, I was married to an alcoholic. That's part of my past. And as a woman, and as a wife, it's very hard to watch someone you love constantly hurting themselves with alcohol. It's like watching someone stab themselves every day and then come at you with a bloody knife and say, I can't stop. I can't stop and I don't know why. And what are you going to do? Like, how are you, as someone who loves deeply, it's easy to be like, okay, well, we'll figure out a plan together. Like, I'm going to keep all the alcohol out of the house, or maybe you can only drink after this time. And it's easy to become so involved. But then what that turns into is you're thinking for them and you're not taking care of them. You're enabling them to continue to not think for themselves. It's again that parent who says, be careful, and tells them to stop without giving them a way to stop or finding their own, right? And so for us, me and my ex-husband, we're actually really close friends now, and he's sober. And he like is a sponsor. It's wonderful. I'm so happy for him. But he said that one of the best things that I could have done for him was to set my own boundaries. I lost like 45 pounds when we were married and going through our divorce, because at some point I realized I cannot be here for you all the time. It is not healthy for either of us. So I'm going to focus on myself and focus on my own body so that my brain can be here for you. Otherwise, I'm exhausted constantly, thinking for both of us, planning for both of us.
Right. That is all like amazing information. Thank you so much for sharing. And I totally like relate to that on so many levels. I think for me, I still have this question right now, because I have had this, very intense situation in my life that of someone who, I have asked to absolutely stop contacting me, who I've asked to in the relationship with, who still won't stop. And so I just want to talk a little bit about like, so 100% with you. It's so true as far as, and I'm learning this and you're learning this, and like, we need to take care of ourselves to be able to give to other people truly. And maybe it's like, maybe giving less is giving more. And then there's also this thing of, and I think that like social media can make us feel like this too, of like, where just this entitlement that people feel like they have to your time. Like, and this, at some point it's your fault when you haven't, or you have responsibility when you haven't communicated or made clear. And also, I don't think ignoring people in a lot of the time is like making it clear enough if you don't at least try and communicate it directly at some point. I mean, that's what I've learned. But then where it's like, because those people, and for me, it feels like a stalking energy and are watching everything you're doing. It's like, well, what do you mean you don't have time? You're taking time for yourself. You have time to talk to these people clearly. Like, so, okay, you're taking this time for yourself. Now, where's your time to talk to me? But as soon as you interact at all with that person, it's like this, I mean, you're opening Pandora's box, because when it comes to stalkers, like any kind of communication is just fuel to the fire. So I just want to talk about that too, because I get caught up in this guilt of like, oh, well, if I'm going to reply to anybody, then I have to reply to everybody but so something, there's something bothersome about this to me, I guess, of like, again, we are all worthy of love and we are all equal. And yet relative to each of our lives, like some people are very like toxic and dangerous and unhealthy to us. And it's not like a personal affront to them to know that they need to be out of your life. It's like taking care of yourself. So I don't know if you can speak to that at all, because I see this person like, or I'm like listening to this and being like, okay, good. Now that you're taking care of yourself, you have all this time to talk to me. And it's like, I have told you, I never want to speak to you again, and you will not respect my wishes.
Mm-hmm. I think, so it also depends on like what level of this relationship is, because I'm in a public sphere as well. I've had a cyber stalker who has just popped up multiple profiles and done, God, just the worst things. And then I've also had, this issue of boundaries with my own family, my immediate family and my parents. And like, I think that all we can do for ourselves is communicate as clearly as we can what we need. So first off, with the stalker, what I ended up doing is I told them this is unacceptable. And then I made it public. What they were doing was unacceptable behavior, and I will not tolerate it. When that fed the fuel, and I realized that it doesn't matter what I say, it's time for me to first ignore. And if ignoring doesn't work, then reclaim my time and just block them. And that can be cold, or that can be reclaiming your time. You're reinvesting in yourself. It's easy to want to invest in everyone else, but they'll get bored. They will move on. There will always be haters. And it's always the people who feel like they don't, not always, but I have found that it's the people that they don't have a voice outside of their screen. So they need to tell you everything about you.
Yes. And it's like, and that's literally what I said to this person. And they've started doing it. They actually did start their own YouTube channel, but it's still, which is like, it's like, can you like stop trying to take over my life and just live yours? And I think that's where it's coming from. And I actually say that with compassion, because as someone who is a dominant kind of person, it's basically like this thing where if we're not using our own voice and controlling the trajectory of our own life, whether consciously or unconsciously, we're trying to control everybody around us.
Yep. Yeah. And like, let me just clarify by saying with this whole blocking thing, it's not a spite of you. We only have 24 hours in the day, right? And waking up and getting ready for the day and taking care of your body already takes hours. Taking care of your mind takes hours. Taking care of your business takes hours. And so why would you want to just give out your time freely to people who just don't care about it? They don't respect you. And when it comes to these these acquaintances or these people who don't know me, but they think they do through this persona that I put online, because it just feels like you have a lot of access to someone because you have hours and hours of videos or hours of content or whatever. It's not actually you. They don't actually know you. You just need to reclaim your own time. With my family, when I had to do this, they were very uncomfortable. The reason why I had to block myself from my family is because they became very uncomfortable with my frankness and my candidness my candor about my job and what it is that I'm interested in, because they're super conservative. And I don't know, so many different things. And all we can do is continue to exercise kindness and compassion towards ourselves and towards others. And if it's not received properly, like I told my family, like, every time you guys talk to me, you're yelling at me, or you're telling me that I'm wrong. And they're like, no, I'm not. I didn't say the word wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever word it is that you used and whatever your intention was, it was not received well. So if you continue with the same intention, but do the wrong actions, the same thing happens. So what is the point of intention? You know, all
Well,
we can do is change action
yes.
so that our intention goes through.
Yes, because, and I think that there's just like a level of humility in that, because yeah, sure, intention is everything. It's just that if you haven't done the work on your shadow side, on your unconscious, on your self-awareness, and I mean, people love to act like they've done the work, and I'm not coming at it as someone who says I'm perfect. I'm coming at it as someone who, the deeper I go into the work, the more I realize, oh, no wonder that action actually did reflect this intention. Because even though my conscious mind wanted to tell me, you know, for instance, in regards to your family, like, oh, my intention is to help Naima. It's like, if they were to get deep into their unconscious, like their real intention is to stop you from doing something that they feel like threatens them. Just like, you know, with this internet stalker, for me, it's like, yeah, my intention is to love you. It's like, you have not done work to realize that your intention is to control someone and
Mm-hmm.
to control someone's time so that you don't have to face the abyss that we all have to face of, you know, taking the helm of your own life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really difficult to see outside of yourself often, you know. It's easy to fall into these ruts of, well, everyone else before me was okay with it, but each person is a new person. There's no such thing as common sense. Nothing. If you can, honestly, if you can tell me one thing that everyone can agree is a bad thing, I'll pay you $100. Like, literally, because I haven't thought of a single thing. People think it's like killing children. Okay, well, I don't know. Go look at concentration camps around the world. You know, there's nothing that we can all agree is bad. So why
All
don't we?
relative.
It's all relative. Everyone is different. So I think it's important to approach each person differently. Like, and as for this person, it's just important, like, to bring to light that we all of this content that we're creating isn't entirely us. There's so much about a human being that we don't feel comfortable sharing. Like, me personally, my art is the most vulnerable thing I can do, even though I'm a sex worker. Like, I am comfortable showing off my body. I am not comfortable talking about my thoughts or showing off my artwork. And those are my own personal boundaries that
Right.
people may not be able to understand.
Well, and you know, the mistake that I made, and I've learned a lot from this, is that I actually did give this person access to emailing me and messaging me. And I mean,
Mhm.
that was something that I needed to learn now if I'm going to continue to be in the public sphere. The funny thing is, that still wasn't me, because it was coming from this place of, you know, of course, relative to the time, I would have thought that I was being genuine. And it was coming from this place of, I feel like I have to be nice to everyone and reply to everyone and let everyone have access to me so that no one can say that, you know, I'm an arrogant bitch or whatever, which obviously that's a whole nother like feminist conversation that we could get into. I just want to say to people, like, putting up boundaries and protecting yourself and being discerning about who you give access to is one of the most loving things that you can actually do to yourself and others. Like, and please, if you're going to learn something from me, like, I guess I felt like when I had this YouTube channel based on spirituality, and, you know, it's becoming more integrated with all parts of myself, thankfully, relationships, politics, all of, like, more than just spirituality, like me as a whole self. I felt like, well, because I need to reflect that I love humanity, I have to let everyone just have total access to me. And maybe that is what an enlightened being would do. I'm not enlightened. So like, you know, like, I'm here to say that. And it's been a huge learning curve of, like, I can still share my ideas and have my opinions and be a worthy person, even if, you know, there are people that I end relationships with and put up boundaries toward, and I don't let everyone have total access to me. That doesn't mean that on a larger scale, it actually means if it's what's best and most healthy for me, that's actually a higher form of love that I'm conveying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the best metaphors that I heard recently is, I'm sure that everyone has heard that, like put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on someone else. But I like the metaphor of, imagine that you show up on a scene, on like this chaos scene, and you're the EMT, right? Your first priority is taking care of yourself. And it's not because you're selfish, it's because you have a certain amount of knowledge and a certain amount of ability that you can give. And if you just run into the fire and hurt yourself, you will kill more people because you've given too much of yourself away. You have to take care of yourself to be able to take care of others. So, I mean, that was just one of the best metaphors I've heard recently, of being able to prioritize in that way so that you can take care of other people. If you're tired, if you're exhausted because of someone else's interactions with you, then that just robs you of the opportunity to help other people, including that person who wants to talk to you.
Yes. This is so powerful. So I just want to, and I hope this is the first of many conversations that we get to have, because clearly it's just like, as always, we could just go on forever and riff on each other. I just, what advice would you give people as to, because again, like, you're one of the most courageous people that I know, and you're sharing that with people, that you living in your truth has led to rejection by many people who, in the sphere of clients, and also in a way by your own family. And so what sort of sustenance or anything like that can you offer to people about, why is it still better to live in your own truth, even if people are going to reject you and hate on you, than it is to pretend to be someone you're not, just so that you don't ruffle any feathers?
No, everybody wants to be like everyone else, right? I realized at a young age that I would never become like everyone else, like whatever, the Barbie, right? And so I think I was just blessed. I guess I could say blessed, even though it wasn't, I didn't feel very blessed at the time, to realize that I need to be in my own. And confrontation is hard. Boundaries are hard. You're going to constantly come up to people who dislike you, who don't like what you have to say, whether you're trying to be amicable or not. So I think personally, it's always just easier to first go inside yourself, realize what it is that you need, and then portray that out to everyone else, so that either you will be met with a reception of love and understanding, and they will try to navigate their actions to further, put their intention, to make their intentions known, or they'll make it very clear that they don't respect your boundaries, at which point it's easier for you to reclaim that time back that you were thinking about someone who obviously doesn't think about you. So your parents will still love you even if they don't accept you most of the time. There are exceptions. Even if their love doesn't come across, they still love you in some way. People will still love you. My friend just told me recently that I'm very good at manifesting love in my life, even though sometimes I don't feel it. There will always be people that hate you, and there will always be people that love you. One of my favorite quotes that I heard recently from Alexandre Dumas's Count of Monte Cristo is, "There is no sadness or happiness in this life. There is only the comparison of both." So if you aim for a middle, then you will never reach the highs of love and acceptance that I have been able to feel through my moments of rejection. Because rejection is a gift. It is a gift of time to you.
Wait, say that again.
Rejection is a gift of time for you. If someone tells you no, say, "Thank you so much for giving me my time back. You have a wonderful life. Adios."
Yes, that's freaking powerful, dude. Wow. I mean, everything you said is, and, you know, also, I think a big part of this, or what it makes me think of, is, and my friend Mandy, Mandy Barbie Lanier sent out an email this morning, that I'll link to in this too, that was just talking about being comfortable living in paradox, because it's like you said, like, we can not agree with what people are doing or set boundaries, or, you know, even not talk to someone for years and still in a larger way love and accept them. Like, both of those things can be true. And also, we can be at our happiest point, our highest high, and that part of us that also goes to the lowest lows, or has been there or will be there again, both of those can be true. Like, I don't, you know if you experience this, sometimes when I come out of a really dark period, even if it's just like within one day, like those, and I'm like, I feel, especially if I shared something vulnerable and real about being from that dark place, I feel like, oh, well, that wasn't me, this is me. You know, like I want to not hold that paradox and only show this certain part of me, and I'm doing myself and the world a disservice in that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's always growing and changing in this life. It's difficult to I think we all need to remember that just because we set a boundary doesn't mean it needs to be definite. We are constantly growing and changing in our lives, as will our boundaries, for ourselves and for everyone else. And just accept change. It sucks.
And accept what is right now, because it is
Yeah.
going to change on some level. So, like, this too shall pass.
Always. Yes. Yes. Even it's really hard to go through things, but there's almost always an end, even if the end is just acclimatizing to it. But we can adjust to anything. We are amazing survivalist beings. And I think it's an underestimation on other people that, like, the one thing that we're good at as human beings is surviving and existing. So you need to focus on your existence and your surviving. Because if you just survive through this world by giving away too much and then constantly feeling upset over that, then you're just teaching your body that this is how we survive. This is how I will continue to live my life.
And it's the
And
only way.
it's the only way. Yeah. It's easy to get in a rut. I mean, even me, I have problems with boundaries and I have problems with being depressed. And the only thing I can do is tell myself that I need to embrace it and move on. Otherwise, I'm teaching myself to be depressed. I'm teaching myself to be anxious.
Yes. Right. And we can always teach exactly like what you just said. We can always teach ourselves different things. And, you know, there's free will. There's our power in this to, it was some kind of quote by, I'll try and find it to put down and below. It was a John Stuart Mill quote, I think, but it was basically like, the real power in being human lies in our ability to improve. And yet we cannot improve unless we're willing to really observe what the data is, and see the truth of it and look at it, not in a, again, even if it's really, really ugly, like, it can still be empowering, because it's like, oh, cool, well, this shows me what I was doing. So it also shows me that, you know, if I start bringing in some different data, it's going to produce a different result. And so why be afraid to even look at the darkest, shittiest things that we've done? It's like, only by looking that straight in the face can we go ahead and.
Right? I think everybody, I mean, I'm guilty of it too. Everyone believes that they are the hero of their own story and everyone else is a side character. But don't forget that you're also a side character in someone else's story.
Yes, I love that. And both of those can be true. We are all like, you know, if we are all the hero and heroine of our own story, everyone else is of theirs. And so you are also a side character in theirs. And you don't get to control the role that like, you can control the way that you feel about others. But even if you do your very best, you know, like, just, you don't get to control if someone else thinks of you, and if the character you're meant to play for them, or that's even most helpful in the largest sense, is a villain.
I know, right? I bought my neighbor upstairs a bottle of wine recently because they were being so loud. They're like marching in place and I couldn't handle it anymore. And me personally, I wouldn't have liked a broom banging on the ceiling. So I thought maybe I'll just buy him a bottle of wine and say, hey, I acknowledge you as parents. Please acknowledge me as a neighbor. And me as the hero of my own story, I'm like, wow, what a kind, wonderful thing. Them as the hero of their own story decided to come down and defend their family from the sarcastic woman who decided to buy a bottle of wine and criticize their children, right? It's the same story,
Exactly.
is it?
Yes.
Also, to my neighbor, are you serious, dude? Who turns down a gift?
Well, not everyone drinks.
That's fair. That's fair.
I think that's, yeah. And that reminds me, I'm going to botch this quote. It does remind me, and, you know, again, just always realizing like we don't have, I think in this human experience, you know, there's, as long as we're in this human experience, like you said, there is no absolute truth, where it's a relative experience, like by definition. And so just realizing like we are never completely right or completely wrong, and being willing to examine that. And when it comes to, it's like you had a good intention there and the impact was not necessarily what, you know, was not necessarily in alignment with your intention. And being willing to look at that and not need to be right or wrong, just like, okay, I see how that could have been received that way too. Like, and just constantly checking in, and instead of being like, well, they received it totally wrong because my intention was right. It's like, well, I mean, probably both have more to learn.
Right? I mean, he asked me to go through the front office, so I do now, you know, whatever. I thought it's easier to talk on a lower level. But then again, this is what it is. You have to grow and change. Find your intentions in a different way. I didn't, you know, everyone has their own ways of reception. Who knows?
Amen, sister. Well, again, I'm just so glad to get to have this real talk with you. And Naima, you are out there doing the Lord's work. You know, we all are in our own way. And I am so excited too. I'm excited during our next conversation. So years ago, my cousin gave me the whole book, Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. And I have it. It's one of the books I'm going to bring with me in my van. So I'm excited to talk more about the Lord's work.
Oh, wonderful. It's wonderful, amazing, beautiful things. Mother warrior poet, that woman.
Yes, seriously, dude. Talk about living in your fearless truth. I mean, shining beacon.
Tell me what.
So, well, I love you, and I will talk to you again soon, both, you know, in recorded versions and obviously outside of it. And thank you so much for sharing your light and sharing your truth.
Thank you for spending time with me.
Mwah.
Mwah.